Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about Ledaig, but also Ledaig. Hi, how are we doing? I'm going to do things slightly differently. Normally I try and do a video about one particular product, but I have two fantastic releases from the same distillery that have slightly different backgrounds, and I thought it would be a bit more interesting to actually compare the two. These are quite different price points, but we can also look at whether those price points are justified. But before I tell you about these releases, let me tell you about the distillery itself. The oft mispronounced Ledaig is the original Scottish Gaelic name of the Tobermory distillery, founded in 1798 by John Sinclair on the northern coast of the Isle of Mull. The distillery has had a very checkered history. After a decent start, it closed in 1837, laying silent for 41 years before reopening in 1878. Multiple owners tried to make it work in that time before Distillers Company Limited mothballed the site in 1930, where it stayed dormant again until a business consortium purchased it in 1972. At this point it was renamed Tobermory, after the town in which it resides, and for those of you with children, you'll recognise part of the town as Balamory, the location of a very popular kids show from a few years back. And yes, that was popular stand-up comedian Miles Jupp in an early role as Archie the Inventor. Only 10 years later, Tobermory closed again, and some of the buildings were turned into holiday flats. It seemed like the poor distillery had run its course for good, but Burn Stewart Distillers, who also own the Deanston and Bunnahabhain distilleries, bought the site in 1993 with the full intention of relaunching it back to glory. The original distillery name Ledaig, which means safe haven, is the branding used for peated expressions from the distillery, and was first launched in 2007 as a 10-year-old bottling following consumer demand. Okay, so now that we know a bit more about the distillery, let me tell you about these two releases. This, try and get this either side, this is an official bottling from the owners, Burn Stewart. It's a part of a new series called the Sinclair series, and this is a no-age statement bottle of Ledaig that has been finished in Rioja red wine casks. No-age statement, so it's a minimum of 3 years old. Normally with Scotch whiskies in particular, if it doesn't have an age statement on it, it normally means that the youngest whiskey in the bottle is under 10 more often than not. If it doesn't have an age statement on, that's basically why. If it does have an age statement on, any age statement on any bottle of Scotch whiskey, that is the youngest whiskey in the bottle. So it could say 10-year-old, but there could be up to 50, 60-year-old in it. But if there's 10-year-old in it, that's the lowest number. Because of marketing, people seem to think that if it's under 10 years old, it's not proper whiskey, etc, etc. So this will be a combination of ages, which could have some old Ledaig in it, but probably because there's some under 10-year-old in it, could be 8, could be 9, could be 7, could be 6, it could be as low as 3, which is the legal minimum to be called whiskey. They don't put an age statement on it. It's a common occurrence in Scotch whiskey at the moment. There is lots of no age statement out there. It's not a bad thing, and to be honest, it's more of a marketing thing in some cases, that if you do put a lower number than 10, that does seem to impact sales around the world. It's just one of those weird idiosyncrasies of Scotch whisky and whisky in general, to be honest, about how it's been marketed through the years and what the common perception is. This particular bottling, however, is from Gordon MacPhail, who are misconstrued as independent bottlers. I like to call them independent maturers. I actually used to work for these guys immediately before opening the shop. Gordon MacPhail buy new make spirit from distilleries and mature it in their own casks. They do not buy casks from various sources which have got whiskey already matured in them, which is what the vast majority of independent bottlers out there do. Gordon MacPhail do things slightly differently. It does say on the label, very small admittedly, and this is quite new that they've actually put this on the label after a rebranding that was a couple of years ago, carefully matured in our own casks with spirit entrusted to us by Ledaig from the Tobermory distillery. So this is not a single cask bottling. This is a number of casks. There are 4,440 bottles of it. It was bottled on the 8th of October 2020. It is a 12-year-old, so it was filled to cask in 2008. We are initial maturation of a refill sherry hogshead, and then it was finished. So whereas this Sinclair series is finished in Rioja cask, I don't know for how long because it doesn't actually say. So a finish can be a couple of weeks, more often than not a few months, kind of 3 to 6 months generally speaking. This particular one, Hermitage cask, Hermitage, what's that? Hermitage red wine cask for 3 years as a finish. So this is a 12-year-old that's had a quarter of its life in those Hermitage red wine casks. Hopefully you can see there's an incredible colour on both of them. The colour is absolutely fantastic. Both of them have really picked up that kind of colour, that red hue, choked a bit there, the red hue from those red wine casks. Price difference. At the moment I have this on the shelf for £38.49 and I have this on the shelf for £70.99. So you're thinking, right, well that's a bit of a price difference. I could buy near enough 2 bottles of this for one of those. But let me tell you what they taste like, and then hopefully you'll be able to decide whether you think actually the price difference is fair. Spoiler alert, I think it does, but I'm going to tell you why. So let me put these on the shelf without breaking them. What I'm going to do first is the Ledaig, the Sinclair series, simply because I have had these before. So I've got a sample bottle of the Ledaig, which was very kindly given to me by the brand owners, which I've been using for samples for my customers that are coming in the store. So if you do come in, you're more than welcome to try it. And actually it does work. People are trying this and snapping this bottle up. It's selling like hotcakes. It's absolutely fantastic. So this is the Ledaig Sinclair series, Rioja finish, no age statement. Surprisingly bottled at 46.3%, which is a little bit of a very specific and almost quite unusual bottling. You'd expect alcohol volume to be bottling at. Normally kind of like a 35 to 40 quid whiskey tends to be 43, 46 maybe if you're lucky, but it tends to be 40, 43. Very specific, but they've obviously kind of looked at this and gone, no, this is actually where it needs to be bottled at. In terms of the number of bottles of this, no idea. I've been ordering it because it's been selling really well and it doesn't seem to be running out. I think it is a limited edition, but we're not talking like, I don't think that there's way more than 4,440 as there is on the Connoisseur's Choice. So, on the nose, you get a lovely peppery smokiness, but it is like a smoky bacon. It's a very barbecue-y smokiness that you get, and this is really common with Ledaig. I think Ledaig is one of the most underrated heavily peated whiskies out there. It really does get kind of like forgotten against Islay and Talisker and Highland Park, and it's this heavily peated whiskey that just gets almost ignored. A lot of people, I think that, it's like, well, I don't even know how to pronounce that. It looks like a weird name. I'm not too sure. I think it's fantastic. It's not quite up there with Kalila as consistently fantastic all the way through, but it's one of the best peated whiskies I've ever had on a fairly consistent theme. There's a couple of Duff Ledaigs out there that I've had in the past, but the majority have been absolutely fantastic, and this is one of them. It's a lovely, slightly sweet barbecue, so it's like barbecued bacon almost, like smoky bacon. You get touches of like frazzles almost, that kind of like smoky barbecue flavour, smoky barbecue bacon flavour. It's absolutely lovely on the nose. There's a touch of salt, there's like sea salt, there's a slight maritime edge in there. Now, the vast majority of Ledaig and Tobermory is matured off the Isle of Mull. I think they have just done a refurbishment of the distillery, and I think there is now space for them to mature some on the island, but I do think that this is actually matured off the island. So I can't say with any categorical nature that this is picking up like the elements of the Isle of Mull itself, but it's the characteristic of the whiskey itself. But there is a saltiness to it, there's a black pepper element, that smokiness is really good, but you do then start to get a bit of fruitiness underneath. There is a sort of a soft red berry element, there's a lovely kind of like red currants, almost a strawberry sweetness in there as well, kind of underlying that barbecue smokiness that's there. Now, on the palate, that smokiness continues, and it's not there initially. It's quite rounded and fruity, and then it just kind of explodes in your mouth, but not in a harsh way. It doesn't bang in your mouth. It really kind of expands and expands, and then all of a sudden you have a mouthful of lovely, sweet, again, barbecue, smoky bacon smokiness in there. That fruitiness is there at the start, and then kind of surrounds and envelops the smokiness. So you get a lovely, rich, red, almost strawberry jamminess. There is a sweetness to it as well that is like a strawberry, raspberry, red fruit jam that kind of cuddles that smoke in and just holds it so it's not becoming too intense. Brilliantly balanced. Quite light in body, quite light on the finish. The smokiness is there, the fruitiness is still there, but it does dissipate a little bit. Not in a bad way. It makes it very, very easy to drink. To be honest, when I first tried this, I didn't know what the ABV was. I just poured it out of the bottle to give it a go and was like, wow, this is really good. I wouldn't have put this at 46.3%. I would have said this is more like a 43. There isn't really that bite that you would expect from a 46 and higher percent ABV. It really is actually quite soft. It's quite subtle. So if I'd have tried this blind, I thought this was maybe 40, probably 43, and it's not. It's 46.3. But it's so well balanced. It's really rounded. You get that lovely fruitiness to it as well. It's incredibly easy to drink. If you like peated whiskey, this is going to really do well for you. I struggle to see how people are not going to like this if you like peated whiskey. That fruitiness is fantastic. The mouthfeel, that kind of like rich, jammy fruitiness that's there, works so well with the peat, the smoky element that's in there, which is already quite sweet on its own. To be honest, red wine cask finishing on heavily peated whiskey, for me, just works. I've yet to have a bad version. It just is a flavour profile. It's that like red fruit as well as that smokiness. The two just combine absolutely brilliantly. So that is the Ledaig Sinclair series Rioja finish, £38.49. I think it's fantastic value for money. I think for under 40 quid, they could easily have put this at 45, even 50 quid, and it still would have been pretty reasonably priced compared to what else is out there on the market. I think for £38.49, it's stunning. It's absolutely fantastic value for money. Now, let's look at the Connoisseur's Choice, which is this one, which is just under double the price. Now, it's actually bottled at 45%, so this isn't even at cask strength. So you might be thinking, well, hang on, what's going on here? How can they charge that? This is a limited edition. There are only 4,440 bottles of it. And this has had care and attention from Gordon MacPhail and the people that are working in the cask management to make sure that they've bottled it at its absolute peak. So this is part of the Connoisseur's Choice range, which has been rebranded recently and is in a sort of a set. So anything that's got this purple edge on, the box I've left over there, so I'm not going to show the box. The box looks amazing as well. You'll see it on the picture on the title screen. They do the wood finished. They haven't had many of these, and the ones that have come out so far since they did the relaunch have been red wine casks. It was it Hermitage Kalila, which also was amazing. They do a 46% sort of like 4 or 5 casks of various ages that tend to be up to about sort of 15, 16 years old. And then they do the cask strength version as well, which is a variety of ages. They then also start to do some super premium ones where it's like in a it's part of the Connoisseur's Choice range, but it's in a much more elaborate box. It looks absolutely amazing, all the way up to the likes of the Glen Grant, which, that was private collection. Forget that, anyway. But yeah, Connoisseur's Choice is sort of a range of whiskies that are showing, really highlighting what Gordon and MacPhail are capable of achieving. So, here we have 45%, 12-year-old, 3 years in Hermitage casks. So on the nose, drier, not as intense of the smokiness. It's a slightly dry smoke. It's much more subtle. It's a bit more refined. You do get a sherry element coming through there as well. And the wininess that's in there is a slightly drier red wine, as Ubisoft sang when they were covered by Jonathan Ross. There is a slightly drier red, I'm really going to struggle with this now, a red wininess coming through. It's more of that slightly tannic element. It's more refined than the Ledaig. Now there's starting to be a meaty note coming through, but it's taken a couple of seconds for it to come through. Now I'm starting to get not smoky bacon, frazzles, now I'm getting big, thick, proper sausages on the barbecue. There is a definite meatiness to it, and there is a barbecue-ness, but it's earlier on, and it's not as smoky. It's more of a dry barbecue edge. But there is a definite meatiness on there, as well as that slight dry wine. That dry red wine, that sort of slightly tannin element. And on the palate, it is drier again. The smokiness is not as intense as it is on the Sinclair series. It's much more refined, but it is there, and it grows again. Now, whereas the Sinclair started off fruity, and then this smoke kind of expands in your mouth, this expands, but it's slower to do it, and actually it gives you more of a chance to taste all the other flavors that are in there. There's a slight milk chocolate note to it. The red berryness is there, and it's strawberries and raspberries again, but you get red currants. There is a lovely wininess. There's an oilier mouthfeel than there is with the Sinclair. The Sinclair is lighter in body. This has more richness to it. It feels thicker, physically thicker in the mouth. The fruitiness is much more complex. It's not that it's one note on the Sinclair, but it's definitely lighter. It's more strawberries, raspberries, very much kind of strawberry jam. This is like a summer pudding. This is a combination. You're starting to get like a blending of red currants and strawberries and raspberries, but also there's like other darker red fruits in there as well. And I think that's the element of the sherry hogshead that they've initially put the whiskey in. It's much more refined. It tastes like a slightly lower alcohol percentage than the, that's completely wrong. It tastes higher, even though it's 45%, it tastes like a higher ABV than the Sinclair. It's got a slightly higher edge, but it's not an alcohol burn edge, it's actually more lifting the flavours up. I would have put this at 46.3%, and I would have put the Sinclair series at about 43. It's much more elegant, it's much more refined, it's much more complex. It's not as easy drinking, but actually it's got more going for it and it demands more of your attention. The Sinclair series, you could probably drink while you're doing something else, watching telly, reading a book. I want a whiskey and I just want to be drinking it. I just want a dram of something while I'm doing something else. This is, I want a whiskey and I want to sit down and I want to really enjoy it and I want to explore what the flavours are. I want a proper whiskey, or I'm not just watching telly, I'm going to watch a really good film and I want a really good dram to go with it. So this is where we start looking at the price point, because on face value, you're going red wine cask Ledaig, 38.49. Red wine cask Ledaig, 71 quid. Well, what's the difference? Why is one nearly twice the price of the other? The difference is really in the body, the structure, the flavour of these two whiskies. The Sinclair series, I think, is fantastic value for money. I also think that this Connoisseur's Choice bottling is fantastic value for money, because you are getting, arguably, twice the amount of complexity, refinement, quality, care, attention than you are getting on the Sinclair series. And in all honesty, if somebody turned around and said, would you rather have 2 bottles of the Sinclair or Connoisseur's Choice? I genuinely can't answer, because I kind of want both. I would want both. It's a fascinating look at what similar work or similar influences in terms of like finishing and red wine cask on the same distillery. There is an age difference as well. You know, this is a 12-year-old, whereas the Sinclair is younger. But there is a justification for having that price difference, and I think it's absolutely fair. If the Sinclair series was the same price as the Connoisseur's Choice, I would go for the Connoisseur's Choice every time. But you start to put that price element in and it's like, okay, actually I can see why. And depending on what budget I'm working on, if I'm wanting a bottle that's more of a everyday drinker, as much as I'm not that keen on that term, and I don't really want to spend a lot of money on it, the Sinclair series is absolutely fantastic. If I want to spend a bit more money and actually get something really, really good quality that's refined, that you can tell work has been done, there is care and attention on this. I'm not saying there's no care and attention on the Sinclair. I think a lot of care and attention is done on that because it's really good value for money. But if you want to just kind of like, I want something extra quality, I want something that I know I've got value for money, the Connoisseur's Choice is absolutely fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant. Both of them are fantastic. And it's fascinating to try the two side by side because they are similar but still very different, and they are both fantastic and they are both really good value for money. So it's kind of a rambling way of saying buy both, because they're both brilliant, and that's why I have them on the shelf. If I didn't think that they were good value for money, if I didn't think the Connoisseur's Choice Ledaig was worth the money, I would not have it on the shelf, and I do. And hopefully this is showing why I have it on the shelf, because I have tried both side by side and I think they're both brilliant, and I think they're both worth what I'm asking you to pay for them, which is what they're asking you to pay for them through me. Something like that anyway. So both available through our website, www.spiritspecialist.com. We do offer UK nationwide delivery. I did have a tiny little bit left. I now have to clean my shelves up, and I also need to wash my hand of Ledaig because I didn't put the lid on properly. I don't think it's gone on any bottles, but I've got even less of a sample of the Connoisseur's Choice Ledaig. Whoops, I've got a wet hand now. But I do have plenty of the Sinclair series. I'm not going to try and pick that up because I'm probably going to drop it on the floor. But if you do want to come into the shop, we are open and trading. You are more than welcome to try that tiny little bit of Connoisseurs choice that I've got left, or have a slightly larger measure of the Sinclair series to see what you think. But I do recommend both of them. I need to go and wash my hands and mop up the floor, so I shall leave you to it. I shall see you at the next video. Cheers.